Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, the U.S. Supreme Court strikes down a key provision of the Voting Rights Act. We'll hear from both sides of the issue. Also tonight, we look back at Legend City, Arizona's only theme park, which debuted 50 years ago this summer. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. The U.S. Supreme Court today struck down a key part of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The provision required 9 states, including Arizona, to get pre-clearance from the Justice Department for changes in voting laws. We'll hear from opponents of today's ruling, but first, we welcome Arizona Attorney General Tom Horne, who filed court documents in support of Alabama's successful challenge to the law. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Ted.
Why is this decision good for Arizona?
It's good for Arizona because we're in a federal system where there's shared sovereignty between the federal government and the state government. And the state government should not have to go to the federal government and say, Mother, may I, for every law that it passes that might tangentially affect elections. And we're talking about moving a precinct across the street. We're talking about changing the hours for the motor vehicle department because licenses are, when you apply for your license, you can register to vote. 40 or 50 laws a year we've had to submit for approval to the Justice Department, and it takes 2 lawyers and a paralegal during that part of the year to go through all their forms, and it's dumb bureaucracy, and it's really an imposition on the sovereignty of the state. We shouldn't have to ask the federal government for permission to pass laws that we think we need in our state.
And yet it's been in effect, this provision has been in effect for Arizona since the early 70s. Why was it put into effect to begin with?
Well, in 1965, Arizona was not included. That's when the Voting Rights Act was first passed. It included just southern states that had a history of over 100 years of serious discrimination against African Americans in voting. And the U.S. Supreme Court considered at that time whether it was imposition on state sovereignty. And they said, this is a very severe remedy, but we're going to approve it because it deals with a very severe problem, which is this long history of discrimination against African Americans. Arizona was not part of that. Then in 1975, they added a provision for what they called language minorities. And they said if you had 5% of your population or more that belonged to a language minority and you hadn't instituted bilingual voting by 1972, you would now be subject to this regime. Now, the law was passed in 75. Why would they make it 72 rather than 74? Because Arizona instituted bilingual voting in 1974, and they wanted to get Arizona. So they backdated it to 72. And here it is, 2013, and we were still being punished for having implemented bilingual voting in 1974 rather than 1972.
Right.
Then as far as the 5% language minorities, less than 2% of Arizonans have a problem with language. The way they got us was by measuring it in terms of if you had a Hispanic last name. More than 5% of our people have a Hispanic last name, but the overwhelming majority of people with Hispanic last names speak English just fine. There was no reason to subject us to this regime where we have to go hand in hand to the federal government for every little law and say, Mother, may I implement this law?
And yet, critics will say that this provision blocked 18 Arizona voting laws from 82 to 2006, and from 1980 to 2000, every single redistricting cycle, at least one plan was blocked by this requirement to go through the Justice Department. Doesn't that suggest that this requirement was important and needed?
No, it really doesn't. Let me tell you one important thing is we invalidated, when I say we, I consider this something of a personal victory because I filed the primary friend of court brief in favor of invalidating the law, and the court did exactly what we asked it to do. But what we eliminated was sections 4 and 5 of the law, which provides for preclearance. Under section 2 of the law, if the state does anything that is discriminatory, they can be sued. And if you sue, some people say, well, it takes years to go through a lawsuit, but the court can issue, if the court thinks there's a high probability of success, it can issue an injunction within 30 days, stopping a practice that it think might be discriminatory. So if anything was passed that was really discriminatory, it can be stopped under Section 2. The fact that the Justice Department stopped things under Sections 4 and 5 doesn't necessarily mean that they were right. It might mean that somebody in the Justice Department had an arbitrary view that really unjustly and arbitrarily stopped something that the Arizona legislature thought was correct.
And there will be those who will say the Justice Department, whether it's DOJ or Congress itself that makes the law to begin with, and can change the law from here on, can actually change what was done today, can get a law in there to affect the outcome, that from a distance they are better qualified to see if this discrimination occurs rather than Arizona officials who might have a dog in the hunt.
That's an interesting elitist view, that some bureaucrat in Washington knows what's better here than the people who live here and elect the...
An objective distance, I think they would suggest.
I would say a mindless bureaucrat in Washington who doesn't really know what's going on here. Absolutely not. If there is discrimination, then a judge should deal with it. And Section 2 remains, and I support Section 2. So somebody can bring a lawsuit if there's discrimination. But the idea that all the laws, we should have to go through filling out these lengthy forms, 40 or 50 laws a year, ruled on by ivory towery, mindless bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., makes absolutely no sense, and is an imposition on the idea that we're in a federal system with dual sovereignty. We're sovereign and the federal government is sovereign. We're not subsidiary to them.
If these were mindless decisions, how come these 18 voting laws that were blocked over this period of time and all these redistricting plans that were blocked as well, why weren't they taken to court? Why weren't they challenged if they were so mindless?
Well, it may be that a decision was made that it was better to make an accommodation than to try to have to go through litigation. I'm not familiar with every single one of those. I've only been Attorney General for 2.5 years. But the general point is that if there's a charge of discrimination, it should go to a judge, and under Section 2, it can go to a judge, and the judge should rule on it. But you shouldn't have to make all of these laws subject to a bureaucrat in the Justice Department deciding whether or not our laws are going to be valid or not.
Last question. For those who say that this requirement is still needed to ensure open and fair access to voters, you say?
I say under Section 2, you can assure open and access to voters by voters with a fair system where you go to a judge and the judge decides whether or not there's something discriminatory. You don't do it by making us fill out a lot of bureaucratic forms about a lot of laws that have nothing to do with anything that could be discriminatory. Moving a precinct across the street, changing the hours of the Motor Vehicles Department. We were ready if Alabama had lost to bring our own case and was prepared. And we were using as an example a law that was passed where a school district with no schools, they were just transporting kids to other districts, was going to join an adjacent district. We had to get preclearance for that. That's foolish, wheel-spinning, bureaucratic nonsense. If you want to fight discrimination, do it with Section 2, where you go to a judge and say, this is discriminatory, and a judge can decide.
Tom, thanks for joining us. We
Great to
appreciate
be with you, Ted.
We want to hear from you. Submit your questions, comments, and concerns via email at arizonahorizon@asu.edu.
And here now to give us an opposing view on today's Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act is Sam Wersinski, Executive Director of the Arizona Advocacy Network. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ted.
Why is this decision bad for Arizona?
I think the Arizona League of Women Voters say it most clearly. Arizona voters lose protection. Section 4 and 5 existed because there was a need other than just Section 2 in the courts to have citizens and groups challenge anti-voting laws that may be put in place and, quite frankly, which we have seen historically take place in Arizona.
And yet those who support the decision say you can still challenge those laws.
You still can challenge those laws, but again, protection has been reduced. When there's a crime spree taking place across a community, laws are passed to stop that crime spree. When the crime spree is over, you don't remove those laws, you use them as a deterrent. What the 5 justices have done on the Supreme Court is they've removed a deterrent for discriminating against communities of color and reducing protection for all voters in Arizona.
Attorney General's office says that these are huge and expensive administrative burdens here, and that some of these requirements are needed for everything from changing a polling place from one side of the street to the other.
Well, we see polling places today in the City of Phoenix election where they no longer exist in neighborhoods, and individuals who in the past may have walked to their neighborhood polling place now have to get on a bus and go 5 miles down the road. That makes voting harder. A democracy should all be about making voting easier, and that's what the Voting Rights Act was all about, protecting the right to vote and also ensuring that communities of color would have the ability to elect somebody from their community who represented their goals and their aspirations.
The idea of how this thing started with bilingual ballots back in the early 70s and kind of a reverse engineer, some would say, back to include Arizona. Again, that's a long time ago. Have things not changed for the better to the point where that deterrent is not needed?
So we've got examples to show how Arizona politicians continue to attack voters and voting rights. In 2011, the legislature tried to pass a law that would prohibit a voter from taking a friend, a family member, or a trusted individual into the polling site with them to help. That was really going to impact new voters and the elderly or those who may need assistance voting. Fortunately, the Department of Justice struck that down as violating Section 4 and 5. Today, we have House Bill 2305, which attacks voters. It attacks civic engagement organizations. It attacks the smaller third parties. So Arizona politicians have had and continue to have a history of making it harder to vote. And when you make it harder to vote, you simply empower these big money special interests so that those politicians can retain power.
And there are some who would say that having to go through the Department of Justice, having to go through Washington in order to do everything from changing a polling place to much more major ideas and changes in voting laws, that it's not right, that they're back in Washington. They don't know what's going on in Arizona. Some have been described as mindless bureaucrats. The whole 9 yards here. How do you respond to that? I mean, why should they be able to tell Arizonans what they can and cannot do when it comes to voting?
We send 11 individuals from Arizona to represent us in Washington, D.C. We have a voice in Washington. And quite honestly, Ted, Arizona Advocacy Network, the League of Women Voters, coalitions like the One Arizona Table, we have all been, happy to have a safety net in Washington, D.C. because of the history of disenfranchising in Arizona. We are charged up, we're energized, we've always fought these battles and these barriers, and we're going to move forward and fight and continue to fight them.
How so?
Well, it's all about organizing. It's all about making sure that voters know what their rights and responsibilities are. And we know that our coalitions, like the One Arizona Coalition, has been very effective in bringing citizens who are eligible to vote into the system to make their voices heard on Election Day. And we'll continue to do that work, engage voters, make sure they know who has passed these regressive laws and how we can overcome them.
So again, when people say that you can still file suit for discrimination and Congress can still act, Congress can still update the Voting Rights Act to take care of some of the concerns that were struck down by the courts today, because basically the courts are saying Congress can't, but Congress can't, the whole night, whatever. With those opportunities and possibilities still out there, do you see that as a forum for change?
That's why elections matter, Ted. And that's why voters, I believe, are going to turn out in historic numbers for a gubernatorial race next year. Because voters realize that our legislature, our politicians in Arizona, are trying to pass laws that prevent them from even having a friend, a family member, or a trusted individual help them in the polling location to cast their ballots. They understand the attacks that are going on against voters in Arizona, all voters and third parties. And I think we're going to see a little shift here, a big shift in 2014.
Last question before you go. For those who say this provision was unnecessary, it's a relic from the past, we should be able to move on. Obviously, Supreme Court agreed. You say
Look at the laws that were passed this session. House Bill 2305 shows the war on voters is not over in Arizona, and the politicians in power and the money that backs them are still intent on reducing voter turnout.
Sam, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ted.
Legend City debuted 50 years ago this summer. The Western-themed amusement park was designed to be Arizona's answer to Disneyland. Legend City is long gone, but longtime Arizonans remember the rides and the stage shows that the park provided. Phoenix area historian John Souther joins us now to talk about Legend City. It's good to have you here. Boy, you just say the words Legend City and all sorts of memories flood back. For those who haven't been here or who were here after like 1983,
1983,
what
yes.
was Legend City?
Legend City was, according to many people, the Disneyland of the desert. It was a Western-themed park that was built on the idea of presenting Arizona history in a very popular fashion. We're not talking about academic history, but rather the legends, hence the name Legend City, the Red Ghost, the Lost Dutchman Gold Mine, things like this.
And where was it located exactly?
It was located in Papago Park, where the SRP buildings are now.
So between Van Buren and Washington.
The address was something like 58th and Washington, yes.
Yes. And how big was this park?
The park itself, the rides and attractions, there were 20 rides and a number of other attractions on 30 acres, and then it had a 30-acre parking lot. They actually set aside 20 acres planning for the Legend City Hotel, but that never materialized.
We got a bunch of photographs here. The Arizona Republic helping us out with these. I want to take a look, especially we'll start with some construction photos. Whose idea was this?
It was a Phoenix advertising executive named Louis Crandall. He visited Disneyland and got the idea of building a theme park here in the Phoenix area. The real issue, and one that he didn't perhaps foresee at the time, was that in the 1960 census, the Phoenix metro area had approximately 660,000 residents, whereas the LA metro area, where Disneyland is, had about 6 million residents. Yeah. LA, of course, had a far more significant tourist base on which to draw visitors to the park. We also have this issue of LA having wonderful year-round weather. In Phoenix, that's not really the case here. And Disney, being an established brand, had something that they could market nationwide and worldwide, whereas in Arizona that wasn't the case.
With all that in mind, the thing opens up. Obviously, some money was secure, but weren't these things taken into consideration? I mean, the heat especially, it opened in the summer.
It did. It opened on June 29th, 1963. There was a great deal of enthusiasm, community support. The Scottsdale Progress article from the day prior to the opening indicates that 10,000 Arizonans purchased stock in the amount of $4 million to help this come into fruition. And it was well received, but within the first year, they were running a deficit and had to find emergency financing, and a year and a half later, the founder was out.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, a year and a half later, bankrupt, huh?
Yes.
We're looking at the entrance there, and I think I actually remember that entrance. I don't know for sure. Your mind plays funny tricks. But as we look at some of these photographs, you had boat rides, you had trains, you had log rides. This was quite an endeavor. This was quite the investment.
Absolutely. It was more than just a bit overambitious on the part of Louis Crandall. Not only did you have these, the infrastructure there, the trains, things like this, but there were constant shows, gunfights, defense of the fort against Native Americans, actors and things. Also a saloon, a number of acts. So this was a very costly facility to run.
And we're looking at the log ride there. I think next we're going to see the Zipper, which was a kind of a hair-raising ride. That actually resulted in a fatality once, correct?
Yes, yes. In fact, there was more than one fatality at the park. Unfortunately, they were accidents that, such as a door on a ride opening, things like this, safety violations. And by 1982, one of the abandoned rides actually caught fire and burned very quickly, and the Tempe Fire Department deemed most of the park to be unsafe, and of course the following year.
Well, with that in mind, I mean, was Legend City ever a success?
Yes, it actually was a success. Ironically, toward the end of its lifespan, the Capel family, who had experience in the carnival industry, purchased Legend City, and they actually made it a going concern. They were grossing over $1 million a year. They indicated that the majority of their business took place in the evenings, of course. But unfortunately, by that point, despite what they were grossing, the land value had appreciated so much that they stood to make a better profit selling the land to SRP, as they did, than continuing to run the park.
And this was, what, September or something like that of 1983?
Well, the park closed in September of 1983. They had actually sold the land to SRP just prior, a few months prior.
Was there much of, I don't remember much of an outcry when Legend City went away. It was kind of almost a forgotten thing, wasn't it?
It went out with kind of a whimper, yes. Yes, it really did.
And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there some sort of rock thing, rock and roll pavilion, some sort of entertainment center that was built out there before they built all those SRP buildings? We're looking, by the way, at the last vestiges of Legend City there. That's a ghost town of a ghost town.
It is indeed, absolutely. And you're right about the performance venue. The original Compton Terrace was there.
Yes.
It was, of course, later moved, and there was a change in the emphasis of Legend City from this kind of Western themed amusement park to something that was more inviting to teenagers and those who were perhaps more inclined to spend their disposable income. So they opened dance facilities, things like this, over the years, in these constant attempts to kind of revamp the park and reach profitability.
And they finally just said, let's build some office buildings, which is basically what's out there right now.
That's precisely what is out there now, absolutely.
And do people out there, when you talk about Legend City, what kind of response do you get? I mean, I'm sure some folks kind of get a wistful look in their eye, and others are going, huh?
Yes, you know, if you talk to somebody who has lived in Phoenix for some time, particularly somebody who grew up here during the time that Legend City operated, there's a great deal of nostalgia. People are very excited to share their experience and things. And when you talk to people who weren't here, they kind of long for the idea of this amusement park, which, of course, has never come about in Phoenix since Legend City closed. So yes, it's a topic that really excites people.
And again, the Western theme, as we're looking here, the Western theme was very big. It only makes sense, and yet the reason it's a Western theme and you see a lot of sand and you don't see a lot, the weather it just seems like it's prohibitive almost. Really, it's either too cold at times in the winter or it's too doggone hot in the summer.
Well, you would think, although again, the Capels indicated that weather, if it were to be open now, they don't think it would have necessarily have been an issue. I think the population growth has certainly helped, but that's certainly the issue that is cited most frequently. Who would open an amusement park where it's 115 degrees in the summer? And contextually, the Western theme was very appropriate for the time and the period. You think about TV listings, 1962 to 63 season. You have Bonanza. You have Gun, Will Travel, all these.
Gunsmoke?
Well, I
was
don't know. Was
Gunsmoke not on then?
I don't know if that was on in 62, 63, but right around there.
Yeah.
In figure 1960, you had John Wayne's theater or movie The Alamo. In 1962, you had John Ford's last major Western, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. So Western theme was very popular, and of course the Arizonans loved to sell this Western image, despite the fact that Phoenix was never a Wild West community.
Right, right. You have an exhibit now at the Arizona Historical Society Museum. Tell us about what's going on there. Is that still going on, or is that over, or what's happening?
Well, I believe there was an event at the Historical Society Museum last Saturday.
Okay.
And it celebrated the 50th anniversary of the opening of Legend City.
So if you miss Legend City and you miss the event, you miss the whole kit and caboodle, huh?
Absolutely, although there are a number of people online who have pages kind of paying tribute to the park and their memories of it.
Well, this was a lot of fun, and it brought back some weird memories. I'm not sure if they're accurate memories, but it brought back some weird ones. It must have been fun for you. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And Wednesday on Arizona Horizon, hear how cities and towns around the state are reacting to legislative changes to Arizona's sales tax collection system. And we'll look at new research that questions the safety of voice-activated technology in cars. That's at 5:30 and 10 on the next Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.